What happens when the CEO of a hotel chain sees a guest being denied breakfast because they're not dressed right? Tobias Granger leaned back in the leather chair of his home office, rubbing his temples. His phone buzzed with another email about declining guest satisfaction scores at one of his 16 hotel locations, the one in Glendale. It wasn't the first time he'd heard complaints about that property. The feedback was vague: staff being unhelpful, service cold, and something about the breakfast experience being humiliating. He'd bought the chain 7 years ago from a retiring family-run owner and had worked hard to build it into something more professional, more consistent. But maybe, he thought, in that push for standards he'd lost touch with how it felt to stay there. Tobias hadn't met most of the staff at all 16 hotels. Corporate handled onboarding. Plus, he'd aged a bit now, 47, with salt and pepper hair, glasses, and a new beard. No one would recognize him, especially not at the Glendale Hotel where he'd never stepped foot. He booked a weekend stay under the name Tom Grant, shaved off his usual clean-cut look, and wore beat-up jeans with a faded hoodie. He looked like a tired traveler. That was the point. The lobby was sleek but cold. A young woman at reception, Lola, gave him a half-smile as she confirmed his check-in. "Breakfast's from 6 to 10. You'll need your room key to get in," she said, then turned to the next guest. He nodded and made his way to his room. It was clean, but something felt off. The hallway smelled like burnt toast, and the carpet was worn down in the center. He noted it mentally. The next morning, Tobias woke early and headed down to the breakfast area at 6:15. There were only 2 other guests seated. A tall man in uniform, clearly the hotel manager, based on the clipboard tucked under his arm, stood near the buffet, watching everything. Tobias grabbed a tray and moved toward the eggs when a voice behind him caught his attention. "Excuse me, sir. You can't be in here." He turned. The manager was speaking to an older man in his 60s with deep lines in his face and a travel bag slung over his shoulder. "I'm staying here," the man replied, holding up his room key. "Room 211. You're not dressed appropriately for breakfast. We have standards." The man wore a stained t-shirt and pajama pants. He looked exhausted. "I just came down to grab coffee and toast," he mumbled. The manager's tone sharpened. "We're not a soup kitchen. Please return to your room and change." Tobias froze. The man stood there, looking defeated. I didn't know there was a dress code." "There is. You're making other guests uncomfortable," the manager said, glancing at Tobias and the 2 other guests who weren't even paying attention. The older man turned, muttering an apology, and shuffled back toward the elevator. Tobias clenched his jaw. His heart pounded. He watched the manager straighten his tie like he'd done something noble. Tobias sat down with a plate of food he couldn't taste. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The manager kept walking around, correcting the kitchen staff about the waffle batter and telling a young worker to smile more. At 7:20, a woman with curly hair and kind eyes came out from the kitchen with a plate and a paper cup. She glanced at the manager, then quietly slipped out of the breakfast area. Tobias waited a moment, then followed from a distance. She walked down the hall, knocked gently on the door to room 211, and handed the older man the plate and coffee. "I'm sorry about earlier," she whispered. "You didn't deserve that." He nodded, eyes wet. "Thank you." Tobias stepped back before they saw him. He returned to the breakfast room and finished his coffee, watching the manager bark orders again. He didn't trust second-hand reports. But seeing it himself? Now it was personal. At 8 o'clock, Tobias returned to his room without finishing breakfast. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bland beige wall. There was a clock ticking near the TV. He hadn't noticed it before. He opened his notebook and wrote one word: standards. Then, underneath it, at the cost of what? He closed the notebook, changed into khakis and a plain polo, and made his way to the service hallway behind the kitchen. A staff-only door had been propped open with a mop bucket. He slipped through unnoticed. The back corridor smelled of bleach and instant coffee. A young man in a white apron stood at the prep counter, wiping trays. His name tag read Luis. He looked up briefly, did a double take, then went back to scrubbing. Tobias cleared his throat. Hey, I'm new. They told me to ask for kitchen support shifts. Luis didn't look up. Yeah, we're always short. You wash or prep. Whatever you need. Luis pointed to a sink full of breakfast pans. Start there. Gloves are in the drawer. Tobias rolled up his sleeves. The water was lukewarm. Egg residue clung to the sides of a metal tray. As he scrubbed, he listened. Luis? A voice called from the walk-in fridge. A woman emerged, short, with a tight bun and a clipboard. Her name tag said, Tanya Kitchen Lead. We're out of half the fruit. Again. I told front desk 2 days ago we needed a restock. Luis glanced at Tobias before saying, They said the manager froze the order account. Tanya stopped walking. Frozen? Why? Luis shrugged. Said we're over budget. But we've been under every week since March. Tanya let out a slow breath. I'll call him again. He won't answer, but I'll call anyway. Tobias didn't say anything. He rinsed the final pan and set it aside to dry. Tanya turned to him. You the new guy? Yeah, just doing some fill-in shifts. Good. Don't expect a break unless someone calls out sick. It's just the 3 of us until noon. She walked out, tapping something into her phone. Luis leaned over. It's been like this for months. Tanya stays late every day to prep for morning, and we still fall behind. Last week, she fainted in the cooler. Didn't stop working? Just got up and kept slicing melon. Tobias nodded once. She doesn't seem like she gets much support. Luis shook his head. We don't even have a real dishwasher. That thing leaks. We use towels to keep the floor from flooding. A bell dinged from the breakfast line. Tanya's voice echoed from the front. Replenish the eggs. Luis grabbed a tray from the warmer. Come on, I'll show you how to restock. They stepped into the customer area. The manager from earlier name tag now visible, Chad General Manager, was standing near the coffee station, arms crossed, scanning the room like a TSA agent. His eyes locked on Tobias. Who are you? Chad asked flatly. Tanya answered for him. Fill in from the temp list. I cleared it last night. Chad didn't look convinced. He's not in uniform. We don't have extras. Laundry service skipped again. Chad's gaze lingered. Fine. But don't touch anything on the guest side. Tobias kept his expression neutral. Luis handed him the egg tray and they slid it into the chafing dish. A guest smiled at Tobias. Thanks, the guest said. Chad snapped, he doesn't speak for the hotel. The guest blinked. Didn't ask him to. Tobias turned and walked back to the kitchen, blood rising in his face. Back in the prep area, Tanya was kneeling near the sink, wringing out a soap towel. I need to request a new mop, she muttered. Luis looked over. That's the 3rd one this month. Tobias crouched to help. Is it always like this? Tanya gave him a tired smile. Only when Chad's working. Which is? Always. By 11, the breakfast crowd had cleared. Tobias helped wipe down the tables. A housekeeper pushed in a cart with linens. Her eyes darting nervously when she saw Chad near the kitchen door. Hey, do you know where the extra pillowcases are? She asked Luis. Before he could answer, Chad cut in. Why are you down here? This is kitchen territory. Go back upstairs. The housekeeper looked down. I was just go, Chad said, before turning and walking into the office behind the front desk. Tanya set down a tray hard enough to rattle the utensils. He talks to everyone like that. Doesn't matter if it's staff or guests. He thinks rudeness equals professionalism. Luis leaned closer to Tobias. You should have seen last week. A guest spilled juice on the carpet. Instead of helping, Chad made her clean it up herself. With her scarf. Tobias felt something coil tight in his chest. At noon, Tanya offered to split her sandwich with Luis. He declined, saying he had brought a granola bar. She didn't offer Tobias any. She didn't have enough. He sat on an overturned crate near the back exit and jotted notes in his notebook. Tanya, competent, overworked, invisible. Chad, controlling, hostile, manipulative. Supplies, withheld staff, scared, isolated culture, punitive at one. Tanya returned from the loading dock, empty-handed. Delivery was canceled, she said to Luis. Again? Driver said the account was paused, not delayed. Paused? Tobias stood. Who has control of the account? Tanya looked at him. Chad. He said we're not justifying expenses. Luis dropped the towel he was folding. We're running out of soap. For dishes. Tanya nodded grimly. I've been buying cleaning supplies out of pocket since April. Tobias's jaw tightened. That's not sustainable. No, Tanya said. But it's survivable. Before he could respond, a voice crackled over the staff intercom. Tanya to front desk. Now. She sighed and headed out. Luis muttered. Watch. He's going to blame her for the Yelp review. What review? Someone posted about being turned away from breakfast for wearing pajamas. Tobias stood still. Luis added, that was this morning. The older guy from 211. Poor guy looked like he hadn't slept all night. Tobias nodded slowly, then walked toward the back hallway. At the front desk, Tanya stood across from Chad, who held a printed sheet in his hand. Explain this, he said. I didn't write that. It's your department. I didn't deny anyone breakfast. You didn't stop it either. Tobias stepped forward. I saw what happened. Chad turned. You're not part of this. I saw it, Tobias repeated. Chad stepped toward him. You want to keep this temp shift? Stay out of management business. Tobias locked eyes with him. It is my business. Chad scoffed. You think you're corporate? Tobias reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He removed a black card with gold lettering and set it on the counter. Chad read it. His expression flickered. Tobias said, I'm Tobias Granger, founder and CEO. Chad took a step back. Tanya froze, eyes widening. Luis stood in the hallway, mouth open. Tobias didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. You publicly humiliated a guest. You restricted supplies. You created a culture of fear. You violated our core standards, not enforced them. Chad stammered. I was trying to. You're done. Turn over your badge. You're no longer employed here. Chad's mouth opened, then closed. He walked into the back office, returned a moment later with his name tag and clipboard and placed them on the counter. Tobias turned to Tanya. You're the acting manager now. Effective immediately. She blinked hard. Sir, I thank you. You've been keeping this place from falling apart with nothing but grit. That ends today. Luis stepped forward. She needs staff. And supplies. Tobias nodded. I've already sent a message to regional. We're bringing in floaters this afternoon. Supply orders are reinstated. Tanya, you'll have direct access to purchasing until we hire a permanent GM. I want you to train them. She swallowed. I can do that. I know. Tobias looked around the lobby, sterile, silent, too clean. We'll talk more soon, he said. But first, I have to check on a guest in room 211. No one said a word as he walked toward the elevator. The elevator doors slid open to the second floor, and Tobias stepped into a hallway that felt even more neglected than it had hours earlier. A small cart with half-used toiletries sat unattended near a utility closet. The overhead lights flickered in a dull rhythm above the worn carpeting. Room 211 was at the very end, next to the stairwell. He knocked gently. After a pause, the door opened just a crack. The older man from that morning blinked at him, confusion flashing across his face. I hope I'm not interrupting, Tobias said. I wanted to check in on you. The man hesitated, then opened the door a little wider. You're the guy from breakfast, he said. Thought you were just another guest. I was. Technically, I still am. Name's Tobias Granger. The man stepped back slightly. You're the one who owns the place? That's right. The man lowered his eyes. Didn't expect someone like you to come knocking. Tobias glanced into the room. The man's suitcase was still zipped, untouched on the bed. A half-drunk coffee sat on the desk beside a crumpled napkin. There was no TV on, no music playing. I saw how you were treated this morning, Tobias said. It wasn't right. I want to apologize. The man exhaled slowly. I figured it just was what it was. Tobias folded his hands in front of him. No, it's not. No one should be made to feel like that in a place they're paying to stay. The man nodded. It was a long drive. Didn't sleep much last night. This trip wasn't for fun. He looked toward the window. I'm here for my brother's funeral. We hadn't spoken in years, but I got the call. He wanted me there last minute. Tobias felt the weight settle in his chest. I'm sorry for your loss. The man gave a slow nod. I didn't pack anything decent. Just grabbed what I could and drove through the night. Figured I'd clean up before the service. Just wanted something in my stomach first. Tobias didn't say anything for a moment. I'd like to comp your stay, he said finally. And we'll cover your meals while you're here. The man blinked. That's not why I told you. I'm not trying to get anything. I know, but I want to make it right as much as I can. The man looked down at his hands, then back at Tobias. I appreciate that. Before Tobias left, he paused at the door. The woman who brought you breakfast, her name's Tanya. She stood up for you in a quiet way. I hope you'll fill out a comment card before you leave. Mention her by name. The man gave a faint nod. She's one of the good ones. Tobias left the room without another word. Back downstairs, he bypassed the front desk and stepped into the small office behind it. Tanya was already there, poring over a spreadsheet on a dusty desktop monitor. Her sleeves were rolled up and she had a pen tucked behind her ear. I thought you had more staff coming, she said without turning. They'll be here around 3. 2 from the Van Nuys location, 1 from HQ. Until then, we hold the line. She turned, eyes tired but focused. I've got the breakfast order updated and sent. But we'll still be short on perishables until tomorrow. I'll have a courier deliver fresh produce tonight. Personal expense. She blinked. You don't have to do that. I do. Especially if I want to sleep tonight. Tanya hesitated. You're not just visiting, are you? No. I was here to see if what I'd been hearing was exaggerated. She didn't ask what he found. She already knew. Luis is running the kitchen right now, she said. He's good, but he's young. Still learning pacing. Then we train him up, Tobias said. And find out why his shift requests keep getting ignored. Tanya nodded. He's been picking up doubles since April. No overtime pay. Chad said we couldn't afford it. Tobias pulled out his phone and typed a quick message to payroll. Not anymore. He'll be retroactively compensated. A knock on the office door interrupted them. It was a woman in her mid-30s wearing the tan uniform of housekeeping. Her tag read Maribel. She held a clipboard close to her chest. Sorry. I didn't know you were in here. Tanya gestured her in. What's up? Maribel stepped forward, eyes darting between them. I wanted to ask about the linen orders. We're out of standard pillowcases again. And the cartwheel's lockup makes it hard to push on the carpet. Tobias turned to her. When's the last time your equipment was replaced? She hesitated. Over a year ago. We've been using the same cards since before I started. Tobias looked at the clipboard. That for inventory? She handed it to him. He scanned it quickly. Neatly organized, color-coded, with handwritten notes in the margins. You do this every week? Yes. I send it to used to send it to Chad. And he didn't really look at it. Told me to stop clogging his inbox. Tobias handed it back. You'll send it to Tanya going forward. And to me. Maribel glanced at Tanya, then back at Tobias. Okay. Also, Tobias added, you'll get 2 new carts by Friday. If they're not here, you call me directly. She looked stunned. Thank you. After she left, Tanya sat down heavily. She's been managing half the floor alone since February. Why? 2 staff left. 1 quit mid-shift. The other got written up for using too much cleaning spray, then just stopped showing up. Tobias closed his eyes for a moment. We'll fix it. I want a full staffing report by end of day. Call whoever you trust. Pull part-timers from other sites if you need to. Tanya looked at him. You're really doing this? Every day I wasn't here, I let this happen. That ends today. She stood. Then there's something else you should see. They crossed the lobby, past the elevators, into a hallway marked maintenance. Tanya unlocked a door and flipped on the light. The room was cramped and cluttered. 2 rusting vacuums leaned against the wall. A broken mini fridge sat in the corner with duct tape across the door. On a shelf above it, A row of boxes labeled out of service in faded marker. Tanya pointed to a clipboard hanging beside the door. Chad didn't report half the broken equipment. Said it would raise flags. We've been doing 3 floors with 1 working vacuum. Tobias scanned the tags. Some of the out-of-service notes were over 6 months old. I want an audit. Everything that's broken, outdated, or missing, we replace it. Tanya gave a slow nod. You'll need to sign off on a big number. I'm not worried about the number anymore. As they exited the room, his phone buzzed. A message from HQ. The regional floaters would arrive in 30 minutes. He forwarded the details to Tanya and stepped outside for a moment. The afternoon air was dry and still. A delivery truck passed by on the street, indifferent to the quiet chaos that had unfolded inside the hotel. He pulled out his notebook again. Under the earlier notes, he wrote, housekeeping under-resourced equipment, neglected staff, solutions ignored, emotional toll, visible accountability begins now. The front doors opened behind him. Luis stepped out, wiping his hands on his jeans. I heard what happened with Chad, he said. Tobias didn't respond right away. He had a hold on everything, Luis continued. People were scared to speak up. They're not anymore, Tobias said. You included. Luis nodded slowly. Then I want to help train the new hires. I've worked every corner of that kitchen. I know what we need. Good, Tobias said. Tanya's in charge, but she'll need a right hand. Luis looked surprised. You trust me like that? You earned it. Just don't burn out. We're going to do this right. They stood in silence for a moment. Across the street, a traveler with 2 suitcases struggled with the taxi door. No one from the hotel moved to help. Tobias stepped back inside. First impressions, he muttered to himself. He walked toward the front desk and picked up the phone. Call security footage. I want to know how many guests arrived today and weren't greeted or helped. Tanya, who had returned to the monitor, nodded. Already pulling it. Tobias folded his arms and stared out the lobby window. The hotel had looked pristine on paper, but paper didn't show the cracks beneath the polish. Now he'd seen them for himself, and he wasn't going anywhere. By 3:30, the replacement staff began arriving. Tobias personally met them at the side entrance, where Tanya had asked them to come in to avoid disruption at the front desk. 2 employees from the Van Nuys location, a middle-aged breakfast cook named Eileen and a young maintenance tech named Jordan, stepped off the shuttle looking uncertain but ready. A third, a guest experience supervisor named Asha from HQ, arrived separately. Tobias shook each of their hands and quickly briefed them on the situation. Support Tanya. Follow her lead. She's been holding this place together without the resources or authority she needed. That ends today. Tanya wasted no time. She assigned Jordan to inspect the laundry room vents and backed it up with a printed checklist of ventilation and equipment temperature logs. Eileen was given a list of kitchen prep tasks and a rundown of the current workflow from Luis. Asha, who'd been sent in to improve the front desk process, joined Maribel upstairs to audit the guest room turnover procedure. By 5, Tobias was back in the office reviewing surveillance timestamps. Asha returned with a black binder sheet compiled during her first 2 hours. We have a pattern, she said. Guests arriving between noon and 3 are routinely left standing at the front desk for more than 5 minutes before anyone greets them. It's not a staffing issue. It's avoidance. Staff see people coming and literally step into the back. Tobias gestured for her to continue. Maribel said it only started happening regularly in the past 6 months. Right around when the new check-in script was introduced. It's too rigid. Staff are afraid to mess it up, so they avoid contact until they're sure they'll remember the lines. That's fixable, Tobias replied. We scrap the script. Build something human and flexible. You'll work with Tanya on that. I already started, Asha said, handing him a draft. 3 prompts. Simple, respectful, and adaptable. He flipped through it, then nodded. Approved. At 6, Tanya returned from the service elevator with a clipboard filled with maintenance logs. She looked up from the papers. The backup water heater's been off for weeks. Jordan says the pilot light was shut off manually. Any reason given? No. but he found a note taped to the side. Said too expensive. Leave it. Initials match Chad's. Tobias stared at the wall. That's why half the third floor had lukewarm showers last week. He picked up the phone and called facilities. We need a replacement, not a repair. Send the invoice to my office. Tanya waited until he hung up. There's something else. He nodded for her to go on. Housekeeping staff were clocking in on paper, not digitally. Chad claimed the system was glitching, but the terminal works fine. He was manually transferring hours to payroll, cutting them down. Tobias didn't respond right away. Then he reached for his notebook and wrote one word at the top of a fresh page: restitution. We'll run the original time cards against the altered records. Everyone gets compensated fully with back pay. I'll issue a formal apology to the entire team. Tanya sat across from him, folding her hands. They didn't expect anyone to care. I didn't give them a reason to, he said. I created distance. I thought systems would protect people. They didn't. A moment passed between them. I need you to stay on, he said. Not just here. I want you to help redesign the entire training model for all 16 locations. Tanya's eyebrows lifted. You're serious? As serious as I've been in years. She leaned back. You'll need to promote internally. Bring up people like Luis, Maribel. They know where the gaps are. I've already added both names to the review list. I want your recommendations by next week. At 7, Tobias walked the property alone. He passed Luis in the kitchen, who was showing Eileen how to reroute the prep table to reduce congestion during breakfast rush. Upstairs, Jordan was checking air circulation in the guest rooms with a portable monitor. Asha had gathered 3 front desk employees in the lounge to role-play new greeting scenarios. Outside room 211, Tobias paused. A do not disturb sign hung on the knob. He left a handwritten note on hotel stationery beneath it. I hope tomorrow is a little lighter. We'll make sure it starts right. TG. He moved on. By 8, Tanya gathered the course staff in the employee lounge. Tobias stood silently at the back while she addressed them. I know this week has been hard. I know some of you are carrying more than you should have been. That's changing. We're rebuilding how this place runs, and we're doing it together. No applause. Just quiet listening, which meant they were still processing. That was honest. That was real. Then Tanya stepped aside and motioned to Tobias. He cleared his throat. I'm not going to give a speech. I'm going to give a promise. You'll be treated with respect. You'll be heard. Not because it's good business, but because it's right. He looked at Maribel, then Luis, then Asha. If someone abuses that promise as staff or leadership, they'll be gone. No warnings. No second chances. He held their gaze. And if you're doing the right thing, even quietly, we'll see you. We'll support you. That's the culture now. A few heads nodded. A few more straightened in their chairs. He stepped out without waiting for a reaction. Tanya followed. At the service hallway, she leaned against the doorframe. You could have left this to someone else, she said. I did. For too long. You coming back tomorrow? I'll be here all week. Quietly. I want to see the morning shift function without intervention. And I want to be the last guest through that breakfast line. Tanya gave a small, tired smile. Not approval. Not praise. Just understanding. He watched as she walked back to the office, clipboard in hand, still moving, still managing. That night, as Tobias sat alone in his room, he looked out at the city lights and thought of the man in room 211, of the scarf used as a rag, of the guest who just wanted toast and a moment of dignity. He made a note to return in 60 days. No notice. No prep. Just walk in and see for himself. Because leadership didn't live in reports or spreadsheets. It lived in the quiet spaces between how someone was greeted and how they were served, between what was said and what was allowed to happen. And he would never let silence speak for him again.